Okay, in this video we're going to show how to make our weld joint or our simple test. We have made our weld path in the previous video, and we continue across the top of the top menus here. We start with the weld pool. We have no weld pools at this time, so we're going to click the new button, give it a name. I'll just call it A. We have a number of weld pool types. The usual type would be the double ellipsoid, which is a weld pool that was developed here. We have a few other types that we'll just perhaps discuss later on. Double ellipsoid is usually the one you will pick. You can call it whatever you like. Here we have. If we edit this, you'll see some default parameters here for the shape of the weld pool. Basically, you can specify this double ellipsoid shape that is, you give it a certain number of millimeters in front and in back of the centroid, and you can give it a width and a depth. For this example, I'm just going to accept the defaults. Okay. This is a description of what the weld pool would look like. You give us a distance in front and a distance in back, a depth and a width. And that gives you your power density for the weld pool. The next item is the weld procedure. Again, there's no weld procedures defined yet, so we click the new button. I'm again going to call this procedure A. And here we have some default parameters show up here. These are just representative. The main ones here to notice are the weld speed, meters per second. Sometimes you're given in inches per second or millimeters per second, or you have to convert to meters per second. Everything is in meters per second in our software. The voltage and current and arc efficiency are usually the ones you would be changing. Percentage of power in front sometimes. You can specify the material for the weld filler metal, or you can just keep the default, but you can choose the material for your filler metal. You have here the weld pool that we already defined. There may be a list here that we would pick the one you want. That's all we need for now. You can, if you click the apply button, the changes that you have made are written into the file. Clicking OK does the same thing, but it also closes the window. The next item is the weld joint. At this point, what we need to do is load the weld path that we made earlier. So we click load weld paths. It brings in the current contents of the weld path that we made earlier, or set of weld paths if we have multiple weld paths in that file. Now at this point we can do several things. We can change the number of passes that we want on this weld path. For the first example, I'll just do a single weld path, so weld pass. So the default is 1, but you can set it to as many passes as your procedure calls for. I will lay down several layers of filler metal. We have here the percentage start and end that we want to weld on. For example, you can make a weld path that is a certain length, and you can decide to only weld from 0 to 50% of that, or from 10% to 90%. Leave start and end unwelded. You can choose whatever portion of the weld path you want to weld on. You can also weld backwards if you want, from 1 to 0. There's a number of parameters here. Delay time. Most of these things are for more advanced procedures. For our initial case, we won't consider them. You can put tack welds, for example, start and end tack welds is very common for these kind of welds. DX, there's the DX specified here that would add a tack weld every 0.3 meters, if whatever you put here. So I'm going to say start and end tack welds, and our weld procedure has been assigned here. There may be a list of weld procedures. We only have one so far. You can see the weld procedure name here. Apply, that becomes permanent. Okay, and now we have defined our weld procedure up to this point, and we go back to our meshing predefined, and here we see different kinds of weld joints that can be made, weld joint meshers. In our example here, I'm going to choose the simplest one for now, which is the weld group. If you have several weld joints that you want to make, all of which have the same welding the meshing parameters for these things, you can just use a weld group. If you have different meshing procedures for different welds, you might choose the weld group 1, which lets you pick either one or several weld paths that you're going to have the same meshing parameters. The meshing parameters in this case are the number of elements that you want in your cross section, and for your filler metal, and you can take a piece out of your parts. In this case, it defaults to 1 centimeter. I'm going to leave the defaults in this case. 1 centimeter into part A and part B will be used as the part of the weld joint, and we have a gap of 1 millimeter between our parts. We have a weld size of 5 millimeters. We're going to extrude an element every 5 millimeters. So let's just say OK and make.